What's up everyone, I'm Melissa Makak from Room 51 and this is Teach the Teach on the Dice Tower, where I teach you how to teach a board game, and in this video I'll be covering Marvel Champions. Now this is a how to teach video, meaning I'm assuming you already know how to play this game and now you're looking to teach it to other players. There are plenty of ways to teach games. This is just a way that has worked for me. It could possibly help you out if you have any sort of difficulties teaching games, or this one in particular. So what I always do is I start with the story behind the game. So this one, you're going up against some sort of villain. You're playing as a superhero, and it's kind of like straight out of the comics. And then your objective of the game is to pretty much beat the villain before they have their scheme fulfilled. And then how the game ends, pretty much when either you win by defeating the villain, getting them down to 0 hit points, or if the villain wins and they have progressed their scheme all the way through. Now I'm going to be covering this video as though the person you're teaching this to is totally new to LCGs, CCGs, all that sort of stuff. They've never played any of that stuff before, and really I think that this particular LCG is a good one to get players started, right? This is sort of like a gateway LCG, I would say. Anyway, with that, so you might want to skip over some of these things if you're playing with sort of like a veteran LCG player. But let's get into things. So normally what I would do is I would start people off with a starter deck, right? So I got my trusty little Spider-Man here, so that's what I'll be showcasing. And I think this is great, right? Because the card here, it tells you what all the cards are supposed to be in the starting deck, and they're typically pretty straightforward for the most part with the cards, which is why I like starting off with the starter deck. You don't have to get into the whole deck building thing and everything like that. And it also allows players to kind of just play the game, see if they like it, and then you could say, like, by the way, you can, construct these decks, which is another whole awesome, fun part of the game. But that's for later. So you give them their starter deck, and then you let them have their, their actual, like, superhero, their alter ego, and you just let them know that the alter ego side is face up first. And that's when I let them kind of, mess around with their little life points dial, and I say, it tells you how many life points you are supposed to start with and what your hand size is, so that they could draw up to their hand size. From there, I give them their player aid, which is fantastic. So pretty much, I give them an overview of the game before we get into things. I say something along the lines of like, yeah, so we're going to be like playing cards on our turn. We're going to be possibly like attacking villains or the main villain himself, maybe thwarting schemes, things like that. But for the most part, what you'll be doing is playing cards. And that's when I already have these set aside, these particular cards. They're every single type, so it's the upgrade, the event, the support card, the ally, and then the resource card, just so they understand what all of these things do. And then I say, the first thing I do is tell them like how to actually play a card, right? I tell them about the cost and how the cost of the card works. And then I just let them know, like how there are different types of cards, right? And, I go through with the upgrade and everything, and just like how each of those work. Like, for example, with the event, I say that's a one-time ability. You play it, and then it goes off, and that's it. It goes into your discard pile. I might go into the resources and just let them know that usually this doesn't have a special ability, but it gives you 2 resources that you could use to spend on playing cards. And so on and so forth, how like the allies, they can help you like defend and attack and all that sort of stuff, all that awesome, cool thing. And then I point them to their little superhero person with their alter ego side, and I let them know that this is the way that this like wreck symbol, I guess, that's where they get to like bring their health points back up. So I let them know, you have to like tap the card, or actually, I don't know what it's called in this game. Exhaust the card, maybe? Usually, that's what it's called. Anyway, so you exhaust the card, which means just, turning it sideways in case they don't know, because they might not know since they've never played maybe a CCG or LCG before. And then healing themselves up. And then, so I let them look at their player aid and say like, so over here, it shows you all the actions you can take. And one of them they might notice is change your form, right? So then you let them know you could change into hero form. And that's when things get really cool. And there's all these other different symbols, and you want to explain what each one does for them. So there's one specifically, the defense ability. I would just keep it at like, that's just going to help you defend against villains and everything that's going on. You might want to not go into exactly what's going to happen with, you know, the, what's it called, boosting and all that sort of stuff. You don't want to go into that just yet. Just say like, hey, yep, you're going to be able to use that to defend against villains and whatnot. Because also it doesn't matter too much to go into detail because everything unexhausts anyway at the end of their turn. And then when the villain phase happens, that's when things could go down. And that's when you could start to explain more about the actual villain phase. But for now, we don't have to worry about that. You just want to worry more about thwarting and attacking. And then also letting them know, like, all of these superheroes and their alter ego sides have a special ability. So usually what I have at this point, I just have everybody read off their special ability for the alter ego. That way everybody starts to feel like, yeah, I'm Peter Parker, or whatever you are, right? Whatever you're playing as. From there, you could actually start playing, right? Start playing the cards. You might want to go first. That way you show them exactly what you're doing. Walk through it, what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, okay? So that's pretty much what I would do. And then when it gets to the, you know, the end phase, you're drawing your cards back up, you explain all that jazz. Then you go into the villain phase and I say, okay, everybody, turn over your player aids to the villain phase side. What? And then you just start placing the threat and explaining why you're doing that, right? Like explaining how like the threat value works and all that sort of stuff. And then you could explain how like defending works, right? Where you have to decide what you're going to be exhausting, but letting them know that once you exhaust something, you're not going to get it for your player phase turn. So that's where the big decision comes in for this particular phase. And then you just kind of start to show how like boosting works. If like, so if you're in alter ego form, that means they're scheming. If you're in superhero form, that means that they're going to attack you. And you might even want to explain that if somebody is going to stay in alter ego form, you might want to explain to them, okay, that's totally fine. On your turn, they're going to scheme, meaning it's going to ramp up and cause possibly the end of the game for a loss. And if you're on the superhero side, they're going to attack you. So that's something that you might actually want to explain when you are in your player phase. But anyway, so then you start, boosting the villain, letting them attack and all that jazz. And then when it comes to the encounter cards, you don't have to explain what each one does beforehand. I usually just, when everybody draws their encounter card, I explain what it is. So what a treachery does, what an enemy does, all that sort of stuff, attachments, great things like that. I don't explain the tough, confused, and stunned cards until they come up, and really you don't even have to explain them all that much because it tells you exactly what they do on the card, which is fantastic. I love when games do that. More should do that. Anyway, same thing for, like these sort of things, the tokens. Explain them as they come out, like what a hazard is, all those different kinds of encounters that you can come across. I would just explain them as they come up because players don't necessarily need to know that, especially for the first playthrough where you're just playing with a starter deck against probably Rhino, which, doesn't make a humongous difference. I haven't mentioned yet the side scheme that, the nemesis for each hero or their obligation. So I usually say it just because I think it sounds cool. I think that players find that like interesting where I'll usually just say like, yeah, you have a nemesis that might come through. You have your obligation because you are also Peter Parker with, your past rent due notice and everything that might come up later in the game, but I don't exactly explain how it comes up other than like, yeah, encounter cards might come out that they will cause these things to ruin your day. But once those encounter cards actually come up, that's when I say, okay, so now this happens, the side scheme happens, your nemesis is attacking you, all that sort of stuff. But with that, that's really all I would do for Marvel Champions. And then you could get right into playing pretty quickly, I'd say, with this game specifically. And I think it's a cool introduction into the LCG line, especially for the superheroes, the Marvel Universe, all that sort of stuff. I think it's pretty thematic in that way. So you could totally sell this game to anybody who likes comics or the movies or whatever it might be. Anyway, that is how I would teach Marvel Champions. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please leave them down below in the comments. Please let me know how you teach this game. I would love to know. Anyway, I'll catch you next time.